officially 6 o'clock?
Yeah, officially. I'm never sure if that's off right or not. Good evening. Welcome to the West Jordan Planning Commission meeting for February 17th, 2015. We have 6 of us present tonight. Commissioner Quinney is excused for the evening. We have one item on our consent calendar tonight and then 3 public hearings. So we'll begin with our consent calendar, which is the minutes from our February 3rd, 2015 meeting. Commissioner Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from our last meeting with the one change on the final page where it mentions the Planning Commission assignment for the Design Review Committee that David Pack will fill out for next year. Could we change next year to say 2015 or this current year since we're already in 2015?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pack, second by Commissioner Jacob. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Which brings us to our first public hearing. Our first one is a text amendment, amending the West Jordan Municipal Code section 13-7C-6. Amendments to the land use map, removing finding B from the general plan amendment findings in the zoning ordinance. City of West Jordan is the applicant. Mr. McCandless.
Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. Again, section 13-7C-6, that's a section of the city code that has the findings for general plan amendments and also the accompanying future land use map. These are the findings that are in that section. It's A through F. And the one that the Planning Commission has seemed to be struggling with, at least on some past issues that we've dealt with, is in section B, which states that the development pattern contained on the land use plan inadequately provides the appropriate optional sites for the use and or change proposed in the amendment. As I noted in the staff report, we think that this finding specifically applies to changes to the future land use map. It supports the view that the land use map really should only be revised if there aren't enough optional sites for the proposed use of the property. We think that it's important because what it does is that it gets rid of all the frivolous changes to the land use map. But by the same token, it doesn't, at least in our view, take into consideration all factors or all scenarios. So as you're aware, in order to make a positive recommendation to the city council, you need to make a finding that all findings support whatever changes to the land use map. But I think what the Planning Commission is finding, particularly we had, I think, one rezoning request where we had I think it was a senior living facility up here by the schools on Redwood Road. That may have been a particular circumstance or case where even senior housing is allowed in a lot of different zoning districts, and so there are other options obviously for placing this facility, but given the circumstance of that particular site, it may make better sense in allowing the use of that at that particular location. So with this, we kind of thought about maybe eliminating this particular finding out of the code. Just in looking through some of the other criteria, they're pretty specific on making sure that whatever change to the future land use map or to the general plan is consistent with other uses, that doesn't cause any harm to any other adjoining properties, that there's plenty of infrastructure. So what we are thinking is that it would be okay to remove finding B, but we think that the other findings that still remain adequately cover any changes to the land use maps. So with that, I'll just open up to any questions that you have.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. But the first one, can you just give us
just a brief history overview of the future land use map, how it came to be, why it is the way it is, why things are laid out as far as this should be that and this should be this, and why it is that way before we talk about exactly how we go about changing that. Let's talk about why it is the way it is.
Okay. The general plan itself is a guide, and it has to be looked at as a guide. The general plan contains the goals and policies. Every land use decision that you make, the city council makes, has to be reviewed against that. But again, you have to keep in mind it's just a guide. That future land use map is the city's crystal ball, if you will. It's what we look at to try to make it an educated guess as to what the best future land use for a particular property would be. And that's going to vary across the city, but we look at impacts to adjoining properties, we look at the use itself. So a number of factors that play into that when we make our recommendation on the land use map. So again, the future land use map is again, it's adopted, it's looked at by the general plan committee, by the planning commission, goes on to the city council, they approve it, and then any subsequent land use changes that come through are weighed against that plan.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So the general plan committee then did have a role in mapping out the future land use map?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Okay, great.
Oh, a very significant role, if I may add, Commissioner Jacob. In addition, where it reflects existing fabric of the community, some of the orientation may be to sustain and preserve those neighborhoods and that environment. Other areas of the city where there's vacant land or infill opportunities that may be based on some percentages of land use that are the best mix for matching jobs and population and retail to those specific land use designations. But as a guide, the city council doesn't have to follow it in all circumstances.
Right.
But it does have to use it as an evaluation to all of the land use decisions they make.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I do have one other question. In the staff report on page 2, after the findings here are listed, the A through F, it says that this finding ... may not reflect current city policy of allowing more freedom to develop property. That current city policy, is that written down somewhere? Is this a part of the general plan, or is this somewhere else?
Well, this is sort of my language. It's just observation of what the city council is willing to do. As has been explained, it really boils down to two philosophies or two policies. A city council, though it doesn't have to, can adhere very tightly to its general plan and to its future land use map, and basically say, we've decided we want use X here, and so if you want to build use X, that's where you're going to do it. In that case, this finding makes sense. Our city council and planning commissions historically have said to developers, we're going to give you more latitude. If you can acquire a piece of property and make a reasonable case as to why the particular use can take place there, even though the city guessed that it would have another use, there's been freedom given to the developer to make that case through those criteria. So no, it's not written down anywhere, but it's just from years and years of operational observation. We just know that they're not adhering to the my way or the highway. They're providing some latitude to developers.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
figured I'd let the questions.
Okay. Seeing no further questions for staff at this time, we will open this portion of the meeting to the public. If there's anybody who would like to comment on this particular item, we would ask you to come forward to the microphone, give your name and contact information. In the event city staff needs to follow up with you, and you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the Planning Commission for further discussion. Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you. Couple of things bother me about this, as you may have probably guessed, might. And that is, one, the characterization that the city put the land use map into place implies to me that that was either city council or city staff or planning commission or somebody working for the city, in quotation marks, if I may. Whereas the general plan committee, who had more than a significant role, according to Mr. Burdette, and I totally agree with this, and Commissioner Pack, you were on that committee, so for example, had a huge role in putting this out. And this was a citizens committee. So in my 2 cents, this is not the city saying what should go where and what should go where. This is the residents of the city saying, our committee of residents, mostly residents, with input from planning and from everybody else, says this is what we think should go where. And I think the wishes of the residents of the city probably should be paramount over the wishes of, or sort of the wishes of a developer, or the whims of, oh well, we just want to change these 3 acres or this quarter-acre parcel or whatever it might be from X or Y or Z. So I'm inclined to keep it there. Maybe it does need a modification, but I don't think it needs to be stricken.
Commissioner Skoski.
Thank you. I think in view of kind of what was brought up with the developers kind of having latitude, I think personally that can be a good thing, because as the developers develop the land based on what they see the future of that area to be, they also know kind of through their own experience what's going to work there. A developer's not going to spend the money to develop the land in that area unless they have a viable, investment for that. So, I don't know. I think my opinion is more to take it out and kind of because in a sense, the developer is going to drive it a little bit, but they're also not going to do it in a way that's reckless.
I would have to agree with that. If you look at this is a static document that was developed at a kind of a snapshot in time, the general plan. Looking at a number of factors at the time, and many of those things change. If I think about the corridor where 56 has just been expanded, not 2 years ago that was agricultural. Mm-hmm. So at the time, if we had stuck with the general plan, we would have no expansion of 56, and then where does that take us from there? So I think the general plan, as Ray had mentioned, it's a guiding document for what we once saw. That has to change as the dynamics change in the community.
Changing B or taking B out, does that give us any more latitude, or?
I think it gives us quite a bit. It doesn't lock us into, as Mr. Thorpe had mentioned, you bring us, we say we want X in Y location. But if you own Y location and you want to build Z, removing finding B allows us to consider that.
If I may, as devil's advocate,
Sure.
finding B hasn't exactly hindered us in the past.
Which is what's brought us to this point.
Just
It has or has not?
It has not. But I think in some cases it might. And when it does, I think it's valuable to have it, because I think there are circumstances where it needs to be applied.
Where the
That's
others
why-
wouldn't apply? Because I see that, A, C, D, E, and F as covering it.
Well, and I think that
It's the other
this
side.
the finding B in this instance is kind of our job. You know, I mean, we are the ones to make sure that, you know, that it follows through, or that all of the other ones cover it. And I don't know, I just think that I find finding B a little bit redundant.
Commissioner Pack.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. It's a tough one because having invested 3 years serving on the General Plan Committee, I agree with staff who have written, on the surface, this appears to be a beneficial policy because it discourages frequent or needless amendments to the adopted general plan. I agree with you, it's a static document. It's tough though because as soon as we finish it, some people are already saying it's outdated because we spent 3 years on it. So you want to make sure it's applied. But true, there may be situations where the amendment may be in the best interest of the city, even though there are ample other optional locations already zoned or planned for the proposed use, as they've said. I agree with Commissioner Rice where the remaining findings would ensure compliance with the general plan to a certain extent. Perhaps, as Commissioner Jacob mentioned, we could modify finding B, maybe put in most beneficial site as opposed to appropriate optional sites. It's just a tough one because I know when I was asked to, if serving on the Planning Commission, would I uphold the general plan, I would assume that all of us were asked that by City Council. Will you follow the general plan? And so I want to ensure that we're safeguarding the general plan. I also see the flip side where, as has been mentioned, this has brought us to a stymied consternation, I think is the word that the staff used, where it just gets difficult to objectively find a finding B instead of subjectively. So I see it both ways, just wondering if there might be some way to modify so that it safeguards the general plan while still providing a little more latitude, as referenced, where professional office on the future land map might be suited better for senior housing, as we've found recently, or as you mentioned, the widening of the corridor out west. So I just wanted to throw that out there that, I just want to safeguard the general plan, but not necessarily stymie the progress of the city.
Commissioner Rice.
Specifically, I see D as covering it because it has to be an overall improvement. So if it's just a lateral move, it would still be a no, needs to be an improvement to the general plan, which we can all admit that sometimes it can be improved. No matter how good it is, there are moments when it can be improved.
Or even looking at F, you could lump that into that is consistent with other adopted plans.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hire?
Commissioner Pack said that caused staff consternation, but we still found a way to move forward with it, even with B in there. Would we not still be able to do that in the future?
I think it could be argued that we were overlooking the intent of finding B, as we had in a few discussions last year.
I will admit to overlooking finding B at times because I felt like if I didn't, nothing would get done.
Any further discussion, comments, concerns? Commissioner Pack?
How about a rewording of it so that we don't have to overlook it, but don't have to strike it? So when we do, because boy, you can really, I mean, when you're reading finding B, the meaning is in the eye of the reader. I mean, to me, you can read things in there. I mean, how many different religions are there that read scriptures differently and have a different interpretation, right? It's kind of the same thing. Would it work instead of inadequately provides the appropriate optional sites? Could we put something like does not provide the most beneficial site?
I actually think, with all due respect, you're kind of left in the same boat. It's whether it's inadequately an optional site or inadequately there might be a better site. I think you're still splitting the same hair, if I may, as a bald man, speak to that.
Well, that is your email address, right?
Commissioner Rice?
I think it does come down to the two philosophies, central planning versus property rights. If I'm looking at finding B, I can say, oh, there's a better place for that, you should build it there, but they don't own that site. They don't, it's not really an option for them, even though we can look at it as an option.
I would agree with that with one caveat. It does come down to two different philosophies, but for me, it's not central planning versus property rights. It's the voice of the people versus property rights, if that makes sense. Because I view the general plan and the future land use map as the voice of the people. It's what the residents came together, it took them 3 years, and said, this is what we want our city to look like. So it does. It's a classic. It's a one more. Here I say it again. It's a classic planning commission. Right. It's a classic planning commission case. It's the rights of the property owner versus the rights of everybody else. And who wins?
You know, though, Commissioner Jacob, with all due respect, I think the plan changes and modifies as the city grows, because when this plan was made, there were a lot of residents West Jordan that don't live here, or that didn't live here at that time. So it has to be fluid in the sense that as time goes on and as those areas develop out, perhaps what the city's general plan was at the time is not what the citizens or residents of the city in that area want now. And so I think that my opinion is that all of the other sections in here make it so that we as a commission have to look into all of these issues that are contained in finding B already. And to me, it comes off as redundant, but it also doesn't allow us that latitude.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and throw a motion out then. I'm going to move that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for the proposed text amendment to Title 13 as addressed in the report.
Second.
Motion by myself, second by Commissioner Rice. Any discussion of the motion?
I think we have to ask ourselves, are there any unintended consequences by taking this out? And I know that's maybe part of our thought process and or part of our discussion, but when it was put in, no one knew what the unintended consequences were, so just threw that question out there. So anybody had any thoughts on that? If they're
Commissioner Pack?
That's a great point, Commissioner Hyder. Thank you. Just in brainstorming, worst case scenario, can we project or forecast what worst case scenario might come up with eliminating finding B? Using devil's advocate, as Commissioner Jacob had mentioned.
Well, that's one of the reasons I asked the questions, because I personally can't really think of anything, so that leads me to probably agree with.
Nor can I, given that we have failed to use it up to this point as it was intended.
Yeah, I tried.
It almost like it's just it's there, but it's not being used anyways. So whether there was some intent behind it originally, it's not being applied as such now. So motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 5-1. Moving on to our item 3 on the agenda is the Sienna Vista Phase 4, 7,000 South, 5715 West, preliminary subdivision plat, 21 lots on 7.2 acres in an R16 C and D zone. Peterson Development, Victor Barnes is the applicant. Is the applicant present? The time is now yours, sir.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Warren Kirk. Address is 225 South, 200 East. I am representing Peterson Development. And other than the facts that are outlined for you in the staff report, we agree with everything. I just wanted to draw one understanding, and that is, sorry, you get in front of a mic, you lose your thoughts. page 6 on the vinyl fence or similar fence in between the Rocky Mountain Power Corridor and the rear lot lines of the subdivision. I just wanted to clarify that. It's my personal belief or our belief that sometimes inside of a corridor, if you box that corridor in, you create problems for policing of that corridor. And your best police are the residents. So if they can't see what's happening on the back side of that fence, you may have graffiti or other things going on. It is open space, or it's planned for future open space. We're recommending a ranch style fence, also vinyl, but this does not clarify what you wanted on the backs of those lots. So other than that, I think we agree with the idea of a consistency along 70th South, where it is Collector Street, not having a masonry wall, but to continue the consistent theme of the brick or the masonry pillars with the vinyl in between and not a solid masonry wall, whether it be cinder block or tilled up. I think those are the only things that I need to point out, unless you have questions in regards to what we're attempting to do.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Drake?
I just have one. With the addition of the 1.2 acre park, do you know what that brings the percentage? I know that it's no longer the condition of approval as it was back in the beginning, the 10% open space. What does that bring the open space to? Do you have any idea?
I don't remember. Larry, do you remember?
I think it's about 5.5%.
5.5.
Yeah, it's not 10. I can tell you that. Yeah, but I'd have to go back and look at the staff report for the amendment to the zone.
I left the file in the car. Anyway, off the top of my head, I don't know.
Not a problem.
I think it was between 5 and 6%.
That's where I would.
And that's including the retention area. Now that's not, the 10% was for the whole 70-something acres.
Right.
Okay, but this was reduced down to 40, and so I still think it's between 5 and 6%
Of the 40.
of the 40.
Right. Okay.
Commissioner Skoski?
Yes, thank you. With the ranch style vinyl fence that you're talking about, I understand that as the two horizontal slats with posts so you can look through it. Is that correct?
Could be either 2 or 3. I don't know that but yes, you are correct. 2 or 3 rails.
The one concern that I have with that is being the properties so close to 70th South, they are residential lots, and that would allow for a child or something to maybe potentially get out onto that roadway. I guess my concern is, I think personally I would rather have graffiti on the back of the fence than have my kid run over by a car.
They may go out the front door, they may go out the back door. It's, again, I'm not disputing that. Nobody ever wants a kid to be run over. I just don't know how you guarantee anything. One of the things that if you do, and I really don't care, I'm just thinking about the residents, it being open or backing onto it's a future, I think I understand correctly, future to be dedicated as a trail system or
It'll never be dedicated. It's owned by Rocky Mountain Power as a power corridor. Anything that would be used other than the power corridor, any use inside there would be up to the Rocky Mountain Power to approve. And so, but I don't believe the city has any plans for trails through there at this point. And so it's a utility corridor is what it is.
Some people may want to put a gate. If I lived there, I probably would put a gate, and I'd probably jog or walk a dog or whatever up and down that, whether or not there's a path. So I don't know, one way or another, people are going to get out or in.
A trail will probably make itself, I would imagine.
Yeah, right. And I don't mean any, pressure with that. There's a concern in my mind for the safety,
And a couple
of children.
Yes, a couple of residents are here, and I'd be happy to hear what they have to say. I've kept close tabs with them. We've worked with them on everything else, including the park and the rezone of that.
Absolutely.
So if they feel different, that's great. I know that they own homes, so we're indifferent a little bit. Just wanted to make sure that there was a clarification tonight on the decision.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? We'll save you some time after the public hearing if there's
Thank you.
anything further. Mr. Gardner?
Okay, so I'll address the fence issue first before I forget it. The one thing in the ordinance does require is different uses. The planning commission can require a fence for safety reasons, and staff believes that the solid vinyl fence is appropriate in this case along that corridor. As I stated, it's someone else's property. It happens to be a large utility company, but it still is private property. And it is a different use. It's a utility corridor. And so I would still hold with the recommendation or the condition that a solid fence, vinyl fence, be placed there. Now, if the property owner down the road modifies that, there's not a lot we can do about that, but as the city, we should not be building fences with gates into other people's property. And so I will believe that we should hold to the ordinance and require a vinyl fence between the two different uses. And this is a different use. It's a utility corridor next to a residential development. And so anyway, this is phase 4 of Sienna Vista that was rezoned.
Larry?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe we ought to make sure the condition matches what you just said.
Okay.
It just says a vinyl fence. If you meant a solid vinyl fence, maybe that we ought to amend that to put a solid one in.
True. The vinyl split rail fence would also be vinyl.
And so anyway, Sienna Vista was rezoned probably 14 years ago to an R16 zone on the east portion of the power corridor. This is phase 4 of Sienna Vista. Originally, there was supposed to be 10% of the entire 70-some acres as open space. However, last year there was an application that the city council modified a zoning condition from 10% open space to a 1.2 acre dedicated park to the city. Sienna Vista Phase 4 will consist of 21 lots and the 1.2 acre park. The 21 lots that are platted at this point preliminarily are all meet the R16 minimum of 6,000 square foot lots. They meet the radius requirements and all the bulk requirements of the R16 zone. In fact, most of the lots, I think the smallest lots is 8,000 square feet. This is a preliminary plan of the 1.2 acre park. As you can see on this, there's a trail system and play areas, courts, barbecue areas. However, this is just a preliminary plan. That will change because a final plan will have to be developed that is approved by our Parks and Engineering Department, and a landscaping plan showing plant types, the irrigation plan, and so forth. So I just want to make that perfectly clear that this is just a preliminary plan, park plan at this point, will be modified as the project moves forward. There already has been discussion on what will go around the park, and staff feels that, or the wall that goes around the park, that a masonry wall around the park is the most appropriate, because vinyl in parks just tends to get destroyed. And this park will actually be in the rear yards of a lot of homes. And so I think since this is going to be dedicated to the city, that a wall should be established, but that can be enforced at final. And so anyway, this application meets all of the criteria of the R16 zone and the subdivision ordinance. And our staff recommends a preliminary approval with the conditions that I've set forth in the staff report, with the modification to condition 8, changing that to a solid vinyl fence be installed between the Rocky Mountain Power Corridor and the homes adjacent to that. So, do you have any questions for me?
We need to address the fence around the park tonight.
That's a condition.
Okay, so I just spoke to the city engineer, and he feels like a rhino rock or a masonry, something that's higher quality than vinyl that will withstand blows from baseballs and feisty kids, I guess. I don't know.
That is something we should add as a condition this evening.
Okay, that will be fine. Particularly, now there was some talk in the pre-meeting about this coming back, so you could see it at final approval. However, if you want to add that as a condition at the preliminary level, I'd be happy to make sure that gets implemented. So.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, I have one.
Commissioner Hyder?
The fence, will that be 3 sides then? Or just along
Yes,
the back?
yes, along, and I don't have a pointer, but I'll use my as the mouse. So it would be along here, along the corridor, and here. Now, there's quite an elevation change from the road to the back, but we still need to have this fenced in, particularly since the city is taking this over and will be maintaining it. So all of us will be maintaining it with our tax dollars.
So you'll have the rhino or rock fence,
Masonry.
masonry fence there along that portion, and then you're saying it'll be vinyl from those points out?
No, around the entire park will be masonry or rhino rock.
Right, but then the vinyl fence that we're talking about, does that run along 70th there, along the back of these lots?
Okay, the vinyl street fence would be along this portion.
That brings up an excellent point, though.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Jacob, you got,
Thank
we're heading down the same.
thank you. So what he's saying is, the backs of the houses, I believe this is Commissioner Heiner's question, is behind the houses along the power corridor would be vinyl, according
Yes.
to condition 8.
So it'd be
Behind the
vinyl.
park would be masonry, and then behind the houses to the south would be
Yeah.
vinyl again. That might be nice to have a patch.
So it's gonna be broken up, in other words.
Yeah. That is the question. To be or not.
So if matching is what you're concerned about, that certainly can be vinyl, but however, there will be a maintenance issue.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? We'll then open the public hearing on this item. There were 2 individuals who filled out comment cards to speak, so I'll allow them to go first if they would like. Susan Gould, can you please give us, I've got your contact information here, but you've got 3 minutes.
So this is a long history for us, I'm sure many of you know, but we have been talking with Peterson quite often. Just to address your issue about the cars on 70th, the way the park is, it's pretty far from 70th. I don't think that's even an issue. I live almost exactly right across the street where the park's going to go in. The one issue I do have about the ranch-style vinyl fencing, if you see the little small park that's down on the corner of 56th and 70th, which we all call the sledding hill, originally that did have ranch-style fencing and was broken many, many times and replaced many, many times, and it's finally been completely taken out. So I would prefer not to have some type of ranch-style fencing there, because I feel like it's too easily broken from what we've already had in the past. A masonry type thing, of course, I think would also hold up very well. And we do appreciate everything that Peterson has been doing to work with us and being able to put the park in that we have been waiting for 8 to 10 years. I've been there almost 9 years now, waiting for this to happen. So, thank you.
Thank you. Emily, is it Bacchus?
Just real quick, I think the masonry wall around the park would be nice. I don't think it would be weird to be broken up because it kind of just shows that's a park and it's different, and it's okay if it's different, and it would hold up better against baseballs, like you said. The fencing along the back, I think, yeah, ranch style. If I were to buy one of those houses, the first thing I would do is put up my own solid vinyl fence. So I actually back the property that Perry owns. So when we moved in, there was a vinyl fence there, and it's never been graffitied on or anything. It's low visibility anyway, but But yeah, so I would say the solid vinyl would probably be preferable. We also get a lot of tumbleweeds that blow from the west, and I wouldn't like those blown in my yard if that were me. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this particular item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I don't know if there's any you'd like to address arising from the public comments.
I think we're okay, as I indicated before, whatever the preference of fencing is on the rear of the lots. Sometimes I like to see consistency, so I'm putting it back to you in terms of whether we do masonry, where that's broken up. It may or may not make a difference. But what will make a difference is that what you can't see here one-dimensionally is the topographical slope from the power corridor. So it's going to make it difficult. You're going to be stepping a masonry wall substantially, whereas vinyl actually does have an element. There is a substantial cost difference. And if I may educate you for 1 minute, I have no stock in any of these companies that are erecting fence, but I can forward you the video on the Rhino Rock fence being destroyed very easily. So as a masonry product, I hope that as a city you're not endorsing it for your Collector Street fencing. I know you have, but it's an inferior product. So something to keep in mind. And if you guys want to see it, it's quite educational. It's pretty simply destroyed. But there is quite a bit of slope from the west to east. So you're going to have a lot of steps in that wall. From the park plan that I don't have access to, I think sometimes we do this a little bit backwards now. I'm glad that I get to stand up. But Larry, if you can click to the park plan for me, that would be I didn't get a chance to go through these slides, but as a preliminary indication, we've actually tried to separate the grass area so that it's not really touching any of the fencing. There's a little bit of a distance with some beds and so forth. So we're hoping that kids aren't running right into the fence. So we really don't care. Devil's in the details. Good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Jack.
I'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Commissioner Pat.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, if we're having to choose vinyl versus Rhino Rock, I'd like to see Rhino Rock. I know nothing is perfect, but not cinder block, but Rhino. I happen to live on 7800, well, it's New Bingham Highway from 4800 West, and kids walk along that corridor all the time at Sky Park, or it's not Sky Park, it's Sunset Park. But boy, it really does look like a war zone, just holes all over the vinyl fence. And understandably, if we're talking consistency versus durability, it still might be more aesthetically pleasing in the long term to have Rhino Rock versus having consistency of vinyl and having that get broken. So I'd be an advocate for the solid fencing, and where we can put Rhino Rock, let's put it there. The other thing, and I know it's just a configuration on the preliminary concept plan for the park, however, if a lot of people are playing down in the area where it's already fenced in, I've just had some bad experiences seeing parks, again, one close to my house where a lot of the kids' play area is up toward the end where they can escape, go out onto roads, or just go behind the walls. I would just like to see that as a condition of approval to ensure that at least staff can, that the Parks Department reviews the configuration of the park. The park that's adjacent to my home has the children's play area right up against the freeway. Well, let's just say it's a lot closer to the freeway than any other park pavilion where you'd be eating on a barbecue, and it seems like it should probably be the other way around. But so I'd like to see that as a condition of approval. I think those are just the two main ideas, and wherever it says open space, just want to ensure we're knowing this is a dedicated park. So we finally get that in. It shouldn't take 9 years to get that in, but we're grateful it's going in right now.
We did have an indication in the pre-meeting that the park was still under discussion as to the layout, so we could bring it back for a final.
It's on conditional one.
Yes, I just want to make sure that it stays there, that either we see it or at least the Parks Department approves that before before the developer moves ahead with it.
We could do both, I think.
May I interject one thing about the wall? In discussing with the city engineer, we'd like to make that a precast wall, not necessarily. Rhino Rock is a foam product, it has a shotcrete material. A precast is a solid cast, that's solid concrete, and so that would be the type of wall we'd want to use if it's not a masonry wall. Around the park is a precast concrete wall, not Rhino Rock. It's Rhino Rock is not durable in that case. So.
Still more aesthetically pleasing than cinder block.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the fencing, I'll just throw in my 2 cents since that's all I got on me at the moment. My wife just did our taxes and that's all I'm gonna have for a while. Regarding the fencing, I think the park that I live by has vinyl fencing all the way around it, the Maples Park, and it has held up quite well. I think not being on an arterial street helps, or not being on a highway helps the vinyl fence to last. And I think if something is going to get destroyed, graffitied, or whatever, the vinyl's probably cheaper to replace. For my 2 cents, I would go with vinyl fencing, solid vinyl fencing everywhere on this project, as far as my 2 cents is concerned.
You have comments?
Tossing that out there. Or masonry. Just kidding.
Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
It's a different color.
No, yeah, different color.
Oh, there we go. Commissioner Skoski.
Oh, okay, based on the findings set forth in the staff report, and upon evidence and explanations received today, I move that the Planning Commission approve the preliminary subdivision plat for Sienna Vista Phase 4, located at approximately 8528 South, 1300 West, subject to the following conditions.
That's not the right address.
Oh, that isn't the right
That's so
address.
far from the right address, I can't even tell.
Yeah, that is.
Well, holy cow.
There you go. Still with the one at the
Right.
beginning of the report there. Set the right address at the beginning of the report. Sorry.
Okay, location, 70th South and 5715 West. Good catch there, Commissioner Jacob. Subject to the following conditions. 1, all lots must comply.
You don't have to read them all.
Okay.
Say 1 through 11.
Okay, 1 through 11, but amended so that the number 8 would have a solid vinyl fence or concrete fence, something full height. And then 11, that we would be able to review the park plan when it comes back.
Could we be more specific on the concrete or whatever part?
Yes. I'm sorry. A solid vinyl fence or precast concrete, full height fence.
I'd love a second and we can discuss this.
I'll second it for discussion.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Skoski, second by Commissioner Jacob. Discussion of the motion. Who would you like to make that determination of whether it's vinyl or precast?
I would like us to be able to make that.
Then we should do so now,
Okay.
instead of leaving it. Kind of
I thought we were gonna see another site plan of the park.
It'll come back we can't have it come back for final, which you do that to the 11, but I mean, if we feel strongly about one way or the other, I think we can give the applicants some direction.
I think we should add it in now as well.
Okay.
So, either one.
So I'd like to offer an amendment that we go with a solid vinyl fence throughout.
Second.
You accept the amendment.
Accepted.
There you go. And I accept it as well.
What about around the park? And so is it different around the park? Is it going to be a masonry or solid precast wall around the park?
Well, hang on, because we didn't have a condition that addressed the park.
That's right. So condition 8 has been amended to be a solid vinyl fence.
Correct. along the corridor there.
In the motion. Now, we could offer another amendment then to the motion to address the fencing specifically
There we go.
around the park. That would be condition 12 probably added in, I would imagine. Add as a condition, condition 12.
Or add it to 11.
So I'll go ahead and offer that as an amendment to the motion, that we add condition 12, stating that the fence abutting the three sides of the park that are not the street are also surrounded by a vinyl solid fence.
No. The city cannot accept a vinyl fence around a park. It'll be a maintenance nightmare. So, how do you want to deal with this?
In similar areas where the city has taken over fences to be maintained, the very least we've accepted to be owned and maintained by the city in recent years has been the Rhino Rock fence. It's a solid vinyl, but it's also got it's not vinyl. Well, anyway, it's got a foam core. It's solid. It's got a solid middle, so it's not a hollow, flimsy vinyl plastic fence. It's actually got substance to it, and that's what the least that I could accept, or our Parks Department would accept to maintain. So that would be the Rhino Rock or higher quality. Rhino Rock being the minimum.
And would you want that on all three sides of the park, or would
Yes.
2 suffice?
All three.
Okay, so the houses will have vinyl, park will have.
The assumption being that the city would maintain all three sides of the fence
That's precast.
that enclose the park.
Solid precast, is that what we're saying, not the Rhino Rock? There's difference, right? There's a difference.
No, Rhino would be fine, but if we want to go solid concrete precast walls, that's even better.
Well, if we're talking durability, then I would do precast over Rhino Rock.
We overestimate the strength of our 6-year-olds, but, okay, I will go ahead and offer as an amendment then. I'll re-amend my amendment. Offer as a friendly amendment to the motion, condition 12, stating that the three sides of the park that are not adjacent to the street will have a precast masonry fence. Does that work?
That would be fine.
So that's my
Commissioner
amendment.
Sadowski, you okay with that?
Yes,
As am I, because
I hope so.
or whatever.
Okay, just to reiterate, so proposing the preliminary subdivision plat, modifying condition 8 to indicate a solid vinyl fence, and adding condition 12 indicating a
Precast masonry.
precast masonry wall on the three sides of the park. Did I catch the essence of all that?
And then can I throw one more fly in the ointment? Did you want to see this final approval?
And we did mention having this come back for final, thank you. Commissioner Back?
Well, by precast, just to define again, are you meaning Rhino Rock or are you meaning a concrete?
Concrete.
Okay, can we say
Reinforced
concrete? Can we add the word concrete in there just so that we?
Isn't that what we're defining with precast?
Precast
Because I thought
masonry.
Rhino Rock could be considered precast as
I guess
well.
that's the question. Does precast masonry preclude Rhino Rock? Exclude Rhino Rock? I thought precast masonry did exclude Rhino Rock. I thought Rhino Rock was the category.
Rhino Rock's a different material. It's a foam core with a shotcrete on the outside. Precast,
It's
it's
not
solid.
precast masonry.
Okay, so a synonym for precast is concrete.
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we should be good, I think.
All right, any other discussion to the multiple motions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
There's your education.
Brings us to our the last item on our agenda, which is a conditional use permit for personal instruction for Forever Cheer and Dance in an M1 ZC zone. Forever Cheer and Dance, Reginald Dyson is the applicant. Is the applicant present? The time is now yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Reginald Dyson, and this is my wife, Obi Dyson. We are cheer brats have been most of our lives, and we've had a great time with it. A lot of lessons learned, and a lot of opportunities for us younger were missed when it came to reinforcing the things that matter, reinforcing the family element, which is fleeting these days. Pushing for the appropriate grade point average for kids to be spending extracurricular time doing anything outside of school. And so with a lot of those things fleeting, we find that there's a huge demand for, I guess, more athletic businesses that do require a little more academic strength or application. So with that, my wife is the State Director of Safety for the National Cheerleading, for USASF, which is the safety board. They govern the entire planet when it comes to cheerleading, and literally. I feel like we have a lot to offer. The general public as a whole, but the youth, namely school-age athletes as well. At the moment, we have 16 athletes, and they're awesome. And a couple other parents are here actually right now. But we really want to continue this business. We want to open the venue at a place that's really well known, which Airport is one of probably the more popular areas or roads traveled in the West Jordan area. And we would really like the conditional permission to go ahead with the business.
Anything you'd like to add to that, or?
No, I think that's everything for me.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? I just have one. Do you know what the business hours are of the adjoining businesses?
So I believe there's one business that is open after 4 p.m., 4 or 5 p.m., and it is another dance studio. And that, I think, would be the only one open at that time.
But it's not within our area, it's a little further.
Yeah, it's just a little further away.
So it wouldn't share your parking lot?
No.
Okay. That's my concern. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Commissioner Hyder.
It has to do with parking. You say you have 16 athletes now, or 60?
16.
16 athletes.
How many will your facility hold when you get it up and running?
It should hold no more than about 45 athletes.
45. How many of those will be parking, and how many of those will be dropped off? And that
It's
sort of
pretty
thing?
much a drop-off run business. There's not much sitting room or anything of the nature there, and the entire performance surface is visible from the parking lot. So with that, we really don't want people parking and, kids kind of throwing gum wrappers and things of that nature. We don't want to create a loitering situation. We just want people in and out, and we want to be able to kind of see the parents as they come. That's about it.
One thing we also talked about doing as well is creating a pattern of how they drop off and come out, so therefore they know which way to enter, which way to exit, so people are not trying to figure out which way to go. So that's something that we talked as well of doing, is setting up signs. This is the entrance, this is the drop-off exit area. So pretty well ran, so it runs smoothly for everybody.
Commissioner Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for you, please, relative to how many parents come in and watch their children do the lessons. So you're mentioning that it is a drop-off type area, but I know, for instance, with my kids taking dance or martial arts, a lot of times I need to park so I can go in and pay the monthly fee, and I also want to see the lessons that are occurring. So is cheerleading similar to that? Do you find that a lot of parents come in to watch the children?
I think it's that is a bit more of the traditional dance. Everything we do is competitive. So even with our dance program, 90 to 95% of what we do is closed, visible from the street, but no one's allowed to be inside of the building at the time. So
Payments and stuff are able to be online as well. So most of our payments is online. Where a lot of the times they do give their children, the athlete, a check. And see, my mom handed you that one week to give you this, and so forth. So.
And we do have our parent meetings, but We're trying to find a much larger venue or a place where we can all eat, because at the moment it is still a pretty small company. But we really don't care to flood that particular area with people. I mean, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but the less people that are hanging out and trying to find something to do or chasing their kids around that parking lot, the better, both for the family and for us as well. So.
And most of our meetings and even parties, parties like activities that we do with the athletes are usually held like in a clubhouse, just mostly because there's kitchen accessible and refrigerators and all that stuff. So we've normally thought about that as well.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? We'll save you some time after the public hearing if there's anything you'd like to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Larson.
Thank you, Chairman. Staff has found that the conditional use application for Forever Cheer and Dance meets the standards listed in the zoning ordinance, as well as the criteria for a conditional use permit to be approved. So staff is recommending approval for Forever Cheer and Dance, located at 6792, with the 3 conditions listed in the staff report.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Pack.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I know that this meets the code with having at least 13 stalls. I just wanted to voice a concern that I've seen with properties that are basically the same or mostly similar in a row like that, somewhat narrow. I live just west of Binghamton Highway on New Bingham Highway, and there are a few buildings there adjacent across the street from a Chevron. And at first it wasn't too bad because there was just a dance studio, but then you added a martial arts studio and now a CrossFit. And the traffic pattern, and I'm grateful that the applicants are trying to establish a traffic pattern, but it's just very dangerous with a narrow street. It's basically impossible to back out of a parking stall when cars are lined up right next to the building on the drop-off and pickup times. So that makes it difficult. And I experienced a similar thing on Prosperity Road with another dance academy where it's in a somewhat industrial area and definitely not made for multiple drop-offs and pickups. It's working, and so I'm certainly not saying that it's not up to code. I would just express a concern for future planning that we ensure that when we have multiple businesses such as this with lots of drop-off and pickup times occurring simultaneously, that we just keep that into consideration and hopefully adequately put in, well, maybe want to look at putting in more parking stalls or ensuring that the road is wider, or just a concern. I just don't want to see anyone getting run over, and I've seen a lot of close calls having to drop my kids off on a daily basis and pick them up with parents that are 5 minutes late or rushing off to something else.
So food for thought as we review parking standards.
Correct. Thank you for letting me express a concern that doesn't necessarily impact that even though criteria 4 has been met on the traffic and parking study.
Any other questions for staff? Any questions for staff? We'll then open the meeting to the public. If there's anybody who would like to comment on this particular item, I would invite you forward to the microphone, and you would have 3 minutes. Seeing none, we will then close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any further discussion. Hearing none, Commissioner Jacob.
Thank you, Chairman. Based on the positive findings set forth in the staff report and the information this evening, I move that we approve the conditional use permit for Forever Cheer and Dance personal instruction for the property located at 6792 South Airport Road, with conditions 1 through 3 is listed in the staff report.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Jacob, second by Commissioner Heiner. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
No, there's not opposed. Sorry.
I was like, there's none opposed. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Tom, do you have any updates for us?
Nothing tonight, no.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any objection to that? We stand adjourned until March 3rd, 2015.
So moved. I would like to thank Councilmember Nichols for coming and for leaving me chocolate. Thanks, Chad.